וגם אני פתאום רואה את הקולות.
Hello and welcome to KOLOT. This is your host, Rabbi Hill Kappenstein, director of the Columbus Community Kollel, and it's a great honor and privilege to bring to you our next episode featuring Doctors David and Miriam Portman. This is really an incredible story, an incredible journey to hear how they got involved with the research to try to help women who are battling breast cancer. You're going to learn a lot of things that if you're not an MD, you didn't know before. It's going to be very inspiring to hear how they got involved in this and really how personal it was to them as well. And we're also going to discuss a few things that really every single person should know as it pertains to women's health. In the middle of the episode, we're going to be joined by our dear friend, Dr. Justin Weprin, to ask a few questions. I wanted someone who knows a little bit more about medicine than myself, which is not saying much, but someone like Justin, who's an OBGYN, to come on and maybe ask a couple questions from his standpoint as well. So we're going to see him somewhere come up in the middle of the episode. Don't worry, you'll know when. And also like to thank our media sponsor, Columbus Jewish News, who is our media sponsor for KOLOT. So again, thanks to the great team over there. That's Steve Pinsky, Stephen Langle, Kevin Edelstein, and everyone else who I may be forgetting. But thank you to Columbus Jewish News for being our media sponsor. But without any further ado, let me tell you about our guest. Dr. David Portman is the CEO and Chief Medical Officer and Principal Investigator for the Phase 2 and 3 lasofoxifene trials and a consultant during drug development. Dr. David Portman has experience in all stages of the regulatory approval process and has worked with the FDA on numerous pre-approval and approval meetings, advisory committees, and submission and approval considerations. He has worked with the medical, marketing, launch, and sales aspects of many products in the women's healthcare space. Dr. Miriam Portman is the Chief Operating Officer. She was the co-founder of the Columbus Center for Women's Health Research, which she oversaw the day-to-day operations of the research center for 18 years. In addition to being the clinical research site manager, Dr. Portman was a sub-investigator for the research studies, including the Phase 2 and 3 lasofoxifene trials. First of all, Doctors David and Miriam Portman, thank you so much for joining KOLOT.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I want to ask you, for starters, how did the two of you get into this arena, this area of women's health?
Well, I'm an MD by training, an OBGYN. So, obviously my background is in providing healthcare for women and spent quite a bit of my career not only taking care of patients, but also doing clinical research, largely sponsored research from pharmaceutical companies developing therapies to help advance women's health. I'll let Miriam tell you a little bit about her background, because that really was also critical in our founding a private research center, which is not something one does every day. But she certainly can tell you how that occurred for us.
So I don't know if you know, Rabbi, but one of 6 children, actually the youngest of 6 children, 5 of whom have become physicians. So 5 out of 6. And you're kind of wondering, how did that happen? So we grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I was the youngest, and our father passed away when I was 8 years old. So left my mother, single mom, 6 children. And we also had an uncle in Dayton, Uncle Herman, who you might know, Herman Abramowitz, who was a family doctor. So those, I think, 2 factors kind of influenced us. One is having this uncle that we were very close to. We all worked with in his practice in our summer vacations when we were growing up, and also having our father passed away at such a young age. He was 47 of a heart attack. Was very impactful in us, pursuing the career of medicine. My eldest sister, Elaine, was the first, and she went to Ohio State Medical School and kind of like, set the path for the rest of us. And she ended up becoming a clinical child psychiatrist here in Columbus. And I don't know if you know it, but she passed away also at the age of 47 from metastatic breast cancer. So her memory is something that we think about a lot. We actually named the clinical trials that we're currently doing the Elaine trials in metastatic breast cancer. So that's been very instrumental in us pursuing this field.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just going to say that, a little bit of my background as well, deep roots in the Columbus medical community. I'm a third generation physician. My grandfather graduated from Ohio State Medical School. It'll be 100 years next year, 100 years ago in 1923. My father also an OBGYN graduate of Ohio State. So we both come from very medical families. As I mentioned, I ran a practice, but always had a keen interest in the most cutting edge science and stayed up to date on the medical literature. And when the opportunity arose to do clinical trials in my office, Miriam had actually had some experience doing those kinds of trials with her older brother, who was a cardiology researcher, who had also founded a research center. So we had good mentors to lead the way for us to know how this process worked. And other companies that I had worked with, I had seen take drugs that larger pharmaceutical companies had lost interest in. And when after doing 140 plus trials ourselves, one of the drugs that we studied, lasofoxifene, was available for in-licensing. So I flew out to San Diego and met with the company that then held the rights to the drug, presented my case, said I was an expert in the area, in the field, had done lots of research, and I thought I could find a path forward for the drug. And the next thing I knew, we were the proud owners of a compound, and then we needed to build a company around that. And so for the last 6 years, we've been forging ahead with some new discoveries for this very old bone drug, a drug for women with osteoporosis, which we've in fact discovered could be the best in-class drug for particular types of breast cancer. So that's a little bit of kind of the journey that we were on. It was largely based on doing a lot of research for other companies and then deciding to throw our hat in the ring and found a company and do it ourselves.
No, that's incredible, and I love how you attribute it to your background, your family, and relatives and extended family who are in this, that are kind of helping you in this journey. I want to ask you if you could share with us, simple folks, some of the general data that an everyday person should know as it pertains to women's health. What are some of the numbers, some of the risks that really make the regular person appreciate what you guys do?
Well, as you heard Miriam's sister, Elaine, we lost at a very young age to advanced breast cancer. Breast cancer, which is our area of research interest currently, affects close to 1 in 8 women in their lifetime. So it is the most common tumor among women, and it's the second lead cause of cancer death among women. So it's still a huge unmet challenge. There are currently therapies that can help patients live with breast cancer, but unfortunately, once that cancer spreads beyond the breast, say to the liver or bones or lungs, it's an unfortunately incurable disease. And right now, the treatments, while they can help delay progression, often lead to what we call resistance. And one of the causes of the resistance is the development of a mutation. And our drug in particular targets a specific mutation, so that if patients can be detected as having that mutation, we're hopeful the drug that we're advancing might be a treatment of choice to help delay or prevent that disease from progressing.
Wow. So it could be life-changing on a national level. This could be something that with Hashem's help could be saving who knows how many lives, 1 in 8 women, supposedly, potentially. Can you walk us through, how did you come to that realization on that specific, I mean, am I pronouncing it right? Lasofoxifene?
Very good. Very good. It usually takes a few tries.
So how did you get to that, and what have you done with it so far?
Yeah, so it's actually a very interesting story. As Miriam mentioned, we've done a lot of women's health research, and when we acquired the drug, it was already very well studied as a pretty good drug to prevent osteoporosis and treat women who might be at risk for developing fractures in menopause. I'm sure most of your listeners are aware that as one ages, the skeleton thins, and there are treatments to prevent bone loss and fracture. So that was our area of expertise. And we actually thought for the first year of working on this, that was what we were going to do, is continue to be women's health researchers. But about a year into our journey, I had a phone call with one of our advisors, who's the head of molecular cancer research at Duke, who told me that they had recently seen in their lab that this compound of ours had unique properties against these mutations of the estrogen receptor, which is now, what we're focused on. The reason why he actually looked at that is also very much by chance and good fortune, in that 30 years ago, he was a young scientist at the company that discovered lasofoxifene. So he had always had a little bit on his laboratory shelf, and just happened to have his research assistant use that drug in this experiment, and it performed better than all the other drugs they looked at. So lo and behold, just by chance, in this conversation, we learned that there was some new discoveries at Duke University that led us down this very unexpected path. So it was, a year into a different approach that we were having that led us to pivot, as they say in the startup world, to an area that has proven very promising.
So can you tell us a little bit about your respective roles in this process? Because I'm sure it's, research is huge, both in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and the resources poured into it, and how you manage all the resources to make sure that you're making maximum impact and use of everything. So can you talk about your respective roles in this process?
Sure. I'll let Miriam is the chief operating officer. She tries to herd all the cats. She can tell you a little bit about our management structure, and then I'm happy to comment.
Sure.
So I'm the chief operating officer, which is a role that was kind of thrust upon me when we started the company. And something I've kind of grown with as years have gone, and something I learned something new every day. It wasn't like I have a business background, I'm a doctor, but I've learned a lot about, financial spreadsheets and, dealing with, accounting and all kinds of, business stuff that I've had to kind of learn on the go. We oversee a management team that's we're a virtual company at this point. We oversee a management team mostly in the Philly area, is where we have most of our rest of our management team. So we meet over Zoom calls and on web conferences, and we're running a company, basically out of my basement office at this point. But we are actually growing, and we are planning on having a headquarters in the coming weeks downtown Columbus. So we're looking forward to, getting out of the basement and finally getting an office. But David and I actually do a lot of our work from the kitchen table, the dining room table. We take a lot of calls, and strategize our day. Fortunately, Dave and I have a lot of experience working together. We ran a research center for, almost 20 years. People are always amazed that, we can work together, but,
that's in the questions, by the way, but
we have a good working relationship as well as a marriage. So we help each other, his strengths and my strengths, we work together well. And I feel like that's what's led to our success, is that we have we complement each other.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and it's as Miriam said, we're running a global drug development program. We have patients who've been enrolled all over the U.S., Canada, as well as Israel. The next trials will certainly expand beyond that. So we really do need to oversee a lot of partners and vendors. So we have drug manufacturers in New York and in North Carolina. We work with labs at the University of Chicago and Duke, Utah, and as well as Pittsburgh. And then, we have regulatory assistants and a slew of lawyers who, make sure that we, go by the books, because as you can imagine, drug development is a highly regulated field. So while, we're a small team, we really do lean on a lot of experts. In our management team, we have people that have worked for decades at Wyeth and Pfizer and AstraZeneca. So even though we don't have global pharma backgrounds, we have experience in doing clinical trials for those kinds of companies. A lot of our management team have decades of expertise in this area.
Wow. No, that is amazing. And for the everyday person that hears about different cancer research, when they don't look into it properly, it's very superficial. They see millions and millions of dollars being poured in, countless hours. And unfortunately, sometimes they think to themselves, what is this doing already? And when will something come about? Like, why are we doing that? I want to know if you could talk to that person and say why this is so important, what we have done and what we are looking to do. And this is why spending all these resources are so important.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question, and it's really a challenge in drug development, given that the majority of new compounds that are investigated never get approved for any use. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of failure, and that's one of the big risks we took in kind of this endeavor, is that going up against the odds, knowing that a lot of drugs just simply fail to get over the finish line. And that takes a long time, right? So we discovered this activity in breast cancer, in advanced resistant breast cancer, about 6 years ago. We've just completed enrollment in our phase 2 trials. So it just kind of gives you an idea that 6 years to start to get some clinical data is what it takes often. And while we're a pretty lean startup, we've still at this point had to raise close to $75 million to get to this point. And it takes a lot more capital to even move it further along with larger studies, and then to be able to market that drug to the broad medical community. So when they say it takes, on average, $1 billion to bring a drug to market, when you take into consideration all the failures, you can see, why that is such a costly endeavor. But without that kind of risk taking and investment, we really wouldn't be making any advances. I think everybody's aware of the advances that were made with COVID and the vaccine and therapeutics. They got a real chance to see how phase 2 and 3 programs can change lives and even the health of the world. And so it's these kinds of investments and risk taking that lead, we hope, to further advancement of everybody's health.
That's beautiful. So now I want to ask you about some of your failures, if you will. What are some of the setbacks that you've had in this process? How did it affect you, and how did you recover?
Do you want to
No,
take that?
No, go ahead.
I'll start with mine if you want, but
no. As we originally acquired this drug thinking that we could get the FDA to reconsider their original decisions around Pfizer's program, right? So we acquired this drug after Pfizer decided to walk away from it as an osteoporosis drug. But I had been working with a lot of other similar compounds and felt we had some very good arguments to try to get them to accept an alternative strategy. And after about a year of banging our heads against the wall and getting no's from the FDA, we realized that that was simply not going to work. So that was a fairly big failure on our part. That we thought we had good case to make, that we could resurrect the drug for its original intended indication. And after getting very vociferous no's from the FDA, we realized that we needed to find another path. And as I mentioned, that path really fell into our lap with the discovery at Duke, which really resurrected and saved our program. Because if it wasn't for that discovery, we probably couldn't have advanced the compound. So that was a big, a big challenge for us. We went in thinking confidently that we had a very good case to make, that the drug should be approved for the broader population to help them with their bone health. But the FDA simply said, nope, we said no before, we're saying no again. And that was about a year and a few $1 million worth of investment in regulatory counseling and intellectual property pursuits. And then we really, at that point, doubled down and said, we found a new path, and that path has proven to be far more open for us. We also had challenges in raising capital when we were just simply going to say, well, we can do what Pfizer didn't. And so we got a lot of no's from investors. But sometimes, when one door closes, others open. And when we found the new opportunity in resistant breast cancer, the investment community was far more interested in that than us, repurposing an old indication.
No, I love that, how you said when one door closes, the other one opens. That's a great, it's sales 101 in a certain sense, that no is just that guy, but the next guy could be yes. Before I turn it over, we have with us Dr. Weprin, another OBGYN. I want to ask you one last question before I turn it over. Did you ever think about trying to lobby and, go to Washington to get laws passed or sponsor bills or whatever it is to try to circumvent what the FDA is telling you? Did you think about going down that route, or nah, not worth it?
Well, I presented other companies' drugs before the FDA in what's called a dispute resolution, where you can actually dispute the FDA's decisions. So we gave that some serious thought. We thought we would go back and say, we beg to differ. We think that this decision was wrong, and we're going to pursue that legal recourse. People don't realize that you can actually dispute it. It's not easy, but it can be done. And that was what we were thinking about doing. But when we realized that we had a different path, we didn't have to go down that route. But you're right. There's, obviously, if there's something that you feel you can argue for, you keep doing it until you've exhausted all options. But fortunately, we didn't have to go that route.
Wow. Amazing. Justin?
I have a couple very basic questions. I guess and I don't know if you've covered this or not, but ultimately, I think people think it's easy to take a drug to, from start to finish. They think it's easy, especially with what happened with the vaccines, and everyone seemed to think it was so, getting things approved is very, very, very challenging. I was hoping you could just walk us through at least the process in a very basic way for people that don't have any medical background. I don't know if that's something that you guys cover or not, but I think it would be interesting for people to hear what you had to go through.
Yeah, no, we mentioned the time it takes and the capital it takes, but first of all, you can't begin a clinical trial unless you have a huge amount of data in animal models to show that there's no toxicology or the drug's not going to cause cancer or do any thing in an animal model. So a lot of that research takes years to just make sure that the drug is safe before you even get into humans. We were fortunate, and a lot of that work was done by the previous sponsor. So we didn't have to do year-long toxicology studies, but every drug before it's studied in humans has to go through that. So we had that data. We had to do other animal experiments to show that it could work in the cancers that we chose to study. We had to manufacture the drug under good manufacturing practice before you can even open up what's called an investigational new drug application, or an IND. So at great risk, we had to go ahead and manufacture enough drug supply that we could tell the FDA we have a pure drug that has been tested in animals, that's safe, even before one single human sees a dose. So that process took us several years just to get to. So we had to raise capital to actually manufacture a drug that we had to convince our investors could potentially work based on some experiments that we had done in animals. And then typically you do phase 1 studies, which tell you what doses might be safe in humans. Phase 2 studies then can kind of optimize the dose and see whether or not it's effective. And then ultimately the phase 3 study is a larger study to show that the safety and efficacy is worth the benefit and doesn't have a significant risk. And that process usually takes about 10 years for a drug from discovery to approval, and often longer. And as we mentioned, we've been at this now in breast cancer for 6 years. And finishing up our phase 2 trials, which we hope could potentially lead to approval. Our phase 2 data will be presented to the FDA this year, and oftentimes with an area that's such an unmet need, they may choose to approve you in an accelerated fashion with phase 2 data. But that's a little bit about what goes into every drug that anybody ever takes off their medicine cabinet had to go through.
So just a quick question to follow that up. Everyone was like very concerned about the vaccines and how quickly they got, pushed through. Knowing what going through this process, do you feel like they did it in the safest way possible? Having an unlimited capital, would that have changed the process or the speed at which it got approved?
You want to take that?
It's okay.
I have great faith in the regulators. I mean, they are very cautious. They're very reluctant to put things out there that they think will jeopardize the general public welfare and health. So I think that there shouldn't be too much suspicion. Obviously, you need to weigh your individual risks and the benefits that you get from any treatment. But given the path that I just explained, most drugs, go through this incredibly rigorous process. The fact that they accelerated that with the vaccines and the therapeutics was simply because of the global emergency that we were facing. We could probably do that with a lot of drugs. But a lot of this is done in stages. So you don't move from phase 1 to scaling up your manufacturing for commercial purposes because of the high probability of failure, right? So we've done things in a very piecemeal way, right? We'll make enough drug to do our studies, but we certainly weren't going to make enough drug to sell to the world. Now, if somebody would advance us the capital to scale up and have the drug ready to go out the door the day that we thought we would get approved, then that would certainly speed things up. But these are all done based on where your risk currently is in your program.
Thank you. One more question. This is kind of to shift gears. As a fellow OBGYN, I see you more as like a mentor to me. And I'm just curious, how you were able to make this big transition. You basically reinvented yourself, and it seems extremely stressful to me And I'm just, what would you say, I guess, advice you have for maybe people that are looking into, changing career paths, or what was your,
Well, it's not something that happened, with the snap of fingers. I mean, we had mentioned earlier, Miriam had some significant experience in doing clinical research through her brother. We started a research center as part of a medical practice. And when I was doing that, I also, became somewhat of an expert in my field, was able to publish some of that research and to conferences across the country, and had a reputation for in the field of developing therapies for women's health, not so much as a company, but as a key opinion leader. And I think it was that experience, and then also working for other pharmaceutical companies, giving them advice on how to develop their drugs and design their studies and go with them to FDA meetings, that ultimately it might have been a little foolish. I didn't realize what we were getting into. And Miriam and I always kind of say, had we known how hard it was, I'm not sure we would have done that. So it was a little bit of our naivete that kind of led us to take that leap. But it was a little bit of having enough information to think we could do it, and not so much that we would have been overwhelmed by what we were about to face. As she said, we didn't know about, hiring a contract drug manufacturing group, or hiring intellectual property lawyers, or, working with, animal experiments and that kind of thing. That was all, things that we just had to, as they often say, is that we were learning to fly as we were building the airplane.
Do you feel like you have an advantage because you're a physician?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know about that. I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have an MBA. We talk to a lot of, business folks and lawyers, and, it just, sometimes you have to learn a whole new language. I'm still learning. Like I said, I learn something new every day. I think having a medical background certainly helps. But, in the world of like VC funds, being a doctor is just sort of being cute. It's like there's some, really smart, talented people out there that, we've had to, kind of, find our way.
I think that we, having taken care of patients, though, we understand what those concerns are. So I think if you look at people who come at this from a pure science background or a pure business background, I don't think, if they've never taken care of a patient, they don't know what really concerns them. From our drug standpoint, there's a lot of other drugs looking in the same space, but they all don't seem to really be as well tolerated as our drug. And I think the fact that I've taken care of a lot of patients, and I know that the only good drug is one that they tolerate and stay on, is something that has given us an advantage. Are patient-centric.
Wow, that's great. And you said something about if you knew what you were going to go through, you may not have gone in. I've heard that before with other people that have accomplished world-changing initiatives, one of which I have in my office. This copy of the Art Scroll Gemara, Rabbi Zlotowitz of blessed memory said, if he knew how hard it would be to translate the Talmud, he would never have gotten involved. Never have done it. And today it's in every synagogue. So hopefully you'll be following a similar path in your field as well. My very last question before we wrap up, and you kind of alluded to it before, but I wanted you to elaborate a little more. Most of the time, I think, Justin, you'll agree with me, most guys don't want their wives in their office. They want there to be a little bit of a separation of work and home. I could just see so many people saying, honey, I love you, and I want it to stay that way. So I do this, you do that, and it'll be great. But you guys did the exact opposite, literally. Can you tell us a little bit of how that has impacted you personally?
I say one of the the problems of the fact that we work together is that we never stop working. I feel like, we're constantly, and our kids will say the same thing. We constantly talk about work, like 24/7. I mean, thank God for Shabbos, right? That is one of the problems, is that we have a hard time separating, work day and like not work day.
And as Miriam said, I think we both kind of acknowledge each other's strengths. I think she's great at, she's the chief operating officer. And so from a operation and execution organizational standpoint, she does a great job. I am more of a big picture person, which fits, my role as CEO well. And I think we, and in life and in our work, we just recognize and hopefully amplify each other's strengths and maybe help, where there are weaknesses. So it's very much complementary. And, working for close to 20 years in the office and in a research center gave us that experience. And it's just carried over to what we're doing now. We're very, very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, what made me so interested in having the two of you on together is I was taking a course by John Gottman, who's this, marriage guru who has a research center in Seattle called the Gottman Institute. And he has 7 principles, and he basically figured out a way to predict divorce with 96% accuracy or something like that. And he has all these different principles and rules and metrics. It's fascinating stuff. You could check it out, gottmaninstitute.com or something like that. And his 7th principle is shared meaning. That couples who have a healthy, happy marriage have a shared meaning. And it sounds like, from hearing from the two of you, that you don't just have, a life of, shared values, but it sounds like a shared mission. And that's really what really spoke to me. We're going to be having, hopefully, another couple. Well, actually, last year we had on a singer, Yaakov Shweki, who has written songs for special needs children, and his wife runs a school for special needs children. So he talked about how the two have really helped one another, and it's really nice to see it in you as well. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I hope when the next trial or whatever it is goes, we'll be able to delve into that on maybe a take 2 episode, a second look. And may Hashem bless you with much hatzlacha, with much success, helping women, helping families. And as we began saying, saving one life is like saving the world. So may Hashem bless you to save many, many worlds.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To listen to all KOLOT episodes and see upcoming guests, visit kolotpodcast.com. We are also on all podcast players. Type in KOLOT on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, and Amazon. Share with your friends, and please make sure to give us a 5-star review. KOLOT is a project of the Columbus Community Kollel, a full-time Jewish learning center in Bexley, staffed with high-caliber Torah scholars. Ever since 1995, boys, girls, men, and women from all backgrounds and affiliations have found many opportunities to connect with Torah and mitzvos at the Kollel. Whether it's a study partner, an engaging lesson, or a program, the Kollel is your one-stop shop for all your Jewish learning. If you want to know how you can benefit from the Kollel, visit thekollel.org. That is TheKollel.org, and forever be inspired.